That's your song? You smiling so hard. You think you can let me too? Be careful now. Oh, shit! Oh. Hold on, get out of the way, get out of the way, get out, all the way, all the way, all the way.
The statewide period of mourning issued by Governor Jeff Landry in remembrance of the 14 lives lost in that terrorist attack continues today. Today will honor Nikyra Dedeaux. Her mother, Melissa, described her daughter as a popular person who was always surrounded by her friends. And that sentiment was echoed by a friend who was with her at the time of the attack. She says she was, quote, a little ball of sunshine. The Gulfport native will be laid to rest on Friday.
On January 1st, 2025, the streets of New Orleans were alive with the energy of New Year's celebrations. Among the crowd was 18-year-old Nikyra Cheyenne Dedeaux, a recent Gulfport High School graduate and aspiring nurse from Mississippi, visiting the city with friends and family. What began as a night of celebration quickly turned to chaos when a pickup truck accelerated onto Bourbon Street, plowing through the crowd with deadly force. Eyewitnesses recall screams and confusion as revelers scrambled to safety, while emergency responders rushed to tend to the injured. Nikyra, full of promise and on the brink of a new chapter in her life, became one of the victims whose lives were abruptly ended. In the aftermath, authorities faced questions about motive, security failures, and whether the attack could have been prevented, leaving families, the city, and the nation grappling with shock, grief, and the urgent need for answers.
We've reported that 2 Mississippians lost their lives early that morning. 25-year-old Matthew Tenedorio and 18-year-old Nikyra Dedeaux. Our Brandon McGill sits down with Nikyra's close friend who witnessed that horrific event unfold right in front of him.
What started as a late night of fun and celebration to ring in the new year quickly took a turn for a group of friends and family from Gulfport visiting New Orleans.
It happened in a split second, so quick that I couldn't even believe it.
17-year-old Zion Parsons.
I just remember hearing the commotion and all the loud banging.
Is describing the moment he witnessed his close friend, 18-year-old Nikyra Dedeaux, lose her life in a matter of minutes on Bourbon Street.
I ended up seeing CCTV footage from the bar, and it showed just how quick it was coming. And a split second, as soon as we made it out the way, Nikyra ran into the street and she was struck by the vehicle.
It's after a truck plowed through a crowd of people early on New Year's Day, killing Nikyra and 13 others and leaving more than 30 people injured.
Hold on, get out of the way, get out of the way, get out, all the way, all the way, all the way.
Zion says he shot this video just minutes before the attack, simply capturing memories of Nikyra, never realizing it would be some of her last.
Her cousin had on a blonde wig. She was easy to spot. So I saw her and I was like, where's Nye? Where's Nye? That was her nickname. I was like, where's Nye? Where's Nikyra? And I'm searching for her in the crowd of people. Everybody is just looking distraught. I'm moving people out of the way. I'm like, where's Nye? Where's Nye? Where's Nye? And I turned my head and it was just her laying in the street. Yeah.
Zion's mother, Shanice Parsons, says while she's fortunate to have her child back home, she hurts inside knowing the outcome was different for others.
I could be sitting in front of this camera talking about him. And, you know, if I would have lost him, that would have, you know what I'm saying, that would have broke me. So I can just imagine, you know what I'm saying, what her mother is feeling. You know what I'm saying?
She says this is something no mother should have to experience, and both she and Zion want all children to know to always listen to their parent.
Man, I lost a very close friend of mine, but her mother lost her daughter. Yeah. And that truly just hurts more than anything.
So it's like it's very important that, you know, just like he said, listen to your parents, because that's all you got right about then. When the world go back to normal, it's gonna be me and him against his mind and what he saw.
In Gulfport, Brandy McGill, WLOX News Now.
Stay with us as we unravel this shocking story and uncover the heartbreaking details of what led to this senseless loss. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? And what are your thoughts as the story unfolds? Welcome to True Crime Tales, where we reveal the crimes that shock communities and the secrets hidden behind closed doors. These are real people, real events, real consequences. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's begin. Nikyra Cheyenne Dedeaux was 18 years old at the time of her death. She was a resident of Gulfport, Mississippi, where she was raised and completed her secondary education. Public records and family statements indicate she had recently graduated from Harrison Central High School in 2024 and was preparing to begin the next phase of her life. She grew up in a family-oriented household in the Gulf Coast region, an area shaped by tourism, service work, and strong community ties. Her upbringing reflected a structured environment focused on school attendance, routine responsibilities, and future planning. Family members described her as someone who followed rules, avoided trouble, and maintained a predictable daily routine. From an early age, Nikyra showed interest in healthcare-related work. According to family statements, she had expressed a desire to enter the nursing field, a goal she carried through her teenage years. This interest influenced her post-graduation plans and educational decisions. After completing high school, Nikyra enrolled to begin a nursing program at Blue Cliff College, with classes scheduled to start shortly after the New Year holiday. Her enrollment had already been arranged, and she was in the transitional period between high school graduation and the start of her professional training. Those who knew her described her personality in consistent terms: organized, reserved, and focused. She was not known for risk-taking behavior and generally avoided high-conflict situations. She maintained a small social circle rather than a wide network of acquaintances, preferring familiar company. Her close relationships were primarily family members and a limited group of friends. There is no public indication that she was involved in disputes, ongoing conflicts, or legal issues prior to the events in New Orleans. The New Year's trip held significance because it was intended as a brief celebration before her next academic commitment. It represented a transitional moment, the final holiday before entering a structured nursing program. According to family accounts, the trip was not spontaneous, but planned as a short visit centered around New Year's Eve festivities. Following the holiday, Nikyra was expected to return to Mississippi and begin her nursing coursework within days. There were no known plans to extend the trip or alter her academic timeline. The New Year's trip to New Orleans was planned in advance. Nikyra traveled with a cousin and friend, both of whom were also young adults. The decision to travel was based on proximity, as New Orleans is within driving distance of Gulfport, and the city is a common destination for regional holiday celebrations. The group arrived in New Orleans prior to New Year's Eve. Details indicate they secured temporary lodging and relied on walking and ride services to move through the city rather than using a personal vehicle once downtown. Earlier in the evening, they participated in typical New Year's activities, including dining and moving through public areas near Bourbon Street. Their movements were consistent with thousands of other visitors in the area that night. As the night progressed into the early hours of January 1st, the group remained in the French Quarter, an area heavily populated at that time. Bourbon Street was crowded with pedestrians, and traffic restrictions were in place to manage the volume of people. In the moments leading up to the attack, Nikyra and her companions were in the process of leaving a restaurant and navigating the sidewalk along Bourbon Street. This location placed them directly within a high-density pedestrian zone. Her last known communications occurred earlier in the night. There is no public evidence suggesting she sensed danger or anticipated an incident. No emergency calls or warning messages from her phone have been reported. Witnesses later told investigators that the scene changed abruptly when a vehicle entered the restricted area at speed. Several witnesses recalled seeing pedestrians struck with little or no time to react. Nikyra was among those hit during the initial seconds of the vehicle's path. The driver of the vehicle was later identified by authorities. He was an adult male with a documented residential history outside Louisiana. His age, residence, and identity were confirmed through law enforcement investigations shortly after the incident. Public records indicate he had a background that included military service, though the nature and duration of that service became a subject of further review by investigators. His employment history showed periods of instability following his time in service. Prior to the attack, there was no widely publicized violent criminal record directly associated with his name. However, investigators examined behavioral indicators, including changes in routine, online activity, and travel behavior. In the weeks leading up to the New Year's event, the suspect had traveled across state lines. These movements were later mapped by authorities to establish a timeline and assess whether the trip to New Orleans was intentional and planned in advance. Law enforcement also reviewed his online presence and digital footprint, including social media activity and online searches. Investigators reported finding content that suggested ideological fixation and exposure to extremist material. The extent of this influence became central to determining motive. Evidence recovered after the attack indicated the suspect may have prepared for the incident ahead of time. Authorities examined vehicle modifications, items found inside the truck, and purchases made prior to the attack to assess intent. Investigators also explored whether warning signs existed that were not detected or acted upon. This included reviewing intelligence databases, prior interactions with law enforcement, and whether any behavioral red flags had been reported by acquaintances or institutions. At the time of reporting, authorities stated there was no confirmed evidence of accomplices, though they continued to examine communications to determine whether the suspect acted entirely alone. The investigation raised broader questions about threat detection, public event security, and whether the suspect's trajectory could have been interrupted before the night of January 1st. At approximately 3:15 a.m. on January 1st, 2025, a pickup truck entered Bourbon Street in New Orleans during peak New Year's Eve crowd congestion. The street was filled with thousands of pedestrians who had remained in the area following midnight celebrations. At that hour, pedestrian traffic significantly outnumbered vehicle movement, and access points were expected to be controlled through barricades and police presence. The vehicle accessed Bourbon Street through a point where barricade protection was either incomplete or temporarily repositioned. Investigators later examined whether the barricade system had gaps due to crowd flow, emergency access planning, or misplacement. The truck did not slow as it entered the pedestrian-heavy zone, indicating the driver did not attempt to yield or stop upon entry. Once on Bourbon Street, the truck accelerated and moved in a straight, deliberate path, traveled with the flow of foot traffic rather than attempting to exit the area. Witnesses estimated the vehicle's speed as significantly higher than walking pace, fast enough to cause immediate and widespread injury upon impact. Surveillance footage later confirmed the vehicle maintained forward momentum without braking for several seconds after entry. The route of the attack extended across multiple blocks. As the truck continued forward, it struck numerous individuals in rapid succession due to the density of the crowd. Many people had limited ability to move out of the way. Some attempted to run towards storefronts or side streets, while others fell as the crowd compressed inward. In the first seconds of impact, several individuals were struck directly by the front of the vehicle, while others were hit by its sides or knocked to the ground by secondary collisions. Nikyra Cheyenne Dedeaux was positioned among a group of pedestrians near the edge of the main walkway. According to investigative findings, she was struck during the initial portion of the attack route, before the vehicle traveled its full distance. Witnesses later described the truck as moving straight through the crowd without deviation. Some recalled hearing engine acceleration followed by screams and the sound of bodies hitting the vehicle or pavement. Others stated that it took several seconds for bystanders to recognize that the incident was intentional rather than an accident. Surveillance footage from nearby businesses and city cameras provided investigators with a comprehensive view of the vehicle's path, speed, and duration. Video analysis confirmed that the truck did not stop immediately after impact, and that the attack unfolded continuously rather than in isolated bursts. The total duration from entry to vehicle stop was measured in under a minute, but the effects were immediate and severe. After the truck came to a stop, the situation escalated further. The driver exited the vehicle, shifting the threat from vehicular assault to direct confrontation. At this stage, law enforcement officers already stationed in the area moved toward the vehicle and the suspect. The suspect was observed carrying a firearm. Officers issued commands while attempting to secure the area and prevent further harm to civilians. An exchange of gunfire followed between the suspect and police. During this confrontation, 2 officers sustained injuries. Their wounds were later classified as non-fatal, but the exchange significantly heightened the urgency of the response. Law enforcement neutralized the suspect at the scene. Following the suspect's death, officers conducted an immediate safety sweep of the vehicle and surrounding area. During this process, authorities identified items of concern that raised the possibility of additional threats. Out of caution, bomb technicians were requested, and nearby areas were treated as potential secondary scenes. The discovery of suspicious materials prompted fears that the vehicle attacked might not have been the sole component of the incident. Law enforcement expanded the perimeter, halted foot traffic, and began systematic searches of nearby streets and structures. Area lockdown procedures were implemented. Bourbon Street and adjacent blocks were closed to the public. Businesses were ordered to shelter in place, and emergency alerts were issued advising people to avoid the area. Officers secured entry points while investigators worked to determine whether any devices posed an active risk. First responders arrived within minutes of the initial impact. Due to the scale of the incident, multiple emergency units were dispatched simultaneously. EMS personnel encountered immediate challenges, including limited access due to crowd density, debris, and the ongoing security threat. Triage decisions were made on-site using mass casualty protocols. Victims were categorized based on severity of their injuries. Some received immediate life-saving treatment, while others were stabilized for transport. The number of injured individuals required responders to prioritize rapidly, often treating multiple patients at once in confined spaces. Transportation to hospitals occurred in waves as ambulances cycled through the secured perimeter. Several nearby hospitals activated emergency protocols, expanding trauma capacity and calling in additional staff. Emergency rooms experienced rapid patient influx within a short time frame. Communication challenges emerged as cellular networks became overloaded. Some responders reported difficulty coordinating with hospitals and command centers. In several cases, information about patient status lagged behind transport decisions, complicating tracking efforts. Medical facilities reported being stretched beyond normal capacity. Hallways were used for patient care, and non-critical cases were diverted to other locations. Despite these efforts, some victims were pronounced dead either at the scene or shortly after arrival at hospitals. The crime scene itself presented preservation challenges. The size of the area, combined with the urgent need to treat victims, made it difficult to maintain a fully intact scene. Investigators later relied heavily on surveillance footage, vehicle data, and witness statements to reconstruct events. The process of identifying victims began while emergency response was still ongoing. Many individuals did not have identification readily available, and some were separated from personal belongings during the chaos. Hospitals worked with law enforcement to compile patient lists and match identities. Families were notified through a combination of hospital outreach and law enforcement contact. In several cases, delays occurred due to uncertainty about patient status or location. The confirmation of Nikyra Cheyenne Dedeaux's death followed standard identification procedures, including medical verification and coordination with next of kin. Her family was informed hours after the attack, once authorities were confident in the identification. During this period, media outlets had already begun reporting casualty numbers, though names were initially withheld. The public release of victim names occurred only after family notifications were completed, but media coverage intensified rapidly. In some instances, families learned partial information through news or social media before receiving official confirmation, leading to confusion and distress. Investigations later reviewed whether communication protocols were followed consistently and whether improvements were needed to prevent premature information release. Errors and delays in notification were documented as part of post-incident evaluations. Within hours of the attack on Bourbon Street, federal authorities assumed control of the investigation. Due to the scale of casualties, the method used, and evidence recovered at the scene, the incident was escalated beyond a local criminal matter. The Federal Bureau of Investigation took the lead, working alongside New Orleans police, Louisiana State Police, and federal counterterrorism units. Jurisdiction shifted quickly to allow broader investigative authority, access to national intelligence databases, and specialized forensic resources. The incident was formally classified as an intentional mass casualty attack rather than a traffic collision. This classification was based on preliminary evidence showing deliberate vehicle acceleration into a secure pedestrian zone, the route taken to the crowd, and the presence of additional weapons and materials connected to the suspect. This determination guided every subsequent investigative step. Crime scene reconstruction began immediately. Investigators mapped the vehicle's path block by block, measuring distances, speeds, and points of impact. Tire marks, debris fields, and damaged street fixtures were documented to establish how the truck entered the area and how long it remained in motion. Laser mapping and 3D modeling were used to reconstruct the scene, allowing analysts to replay the attack sequence second by second. The vehicle itself became a central piece of evidence. It was secured, transported, and examined at a control facility. Investigators assessed mechanical condition, braking systems, steering components, and throttle response to rule out equipment failure. No evidence of mechanical malfunction was found. Damage patterns on the front and sides of the truck were consistent with repeated pedestrian impacts rather than a single collision. Forensic teams recovered physical evidence from inside and outside the vehicle, including fingerprints, DNA, fibers, and trace materials. Items found inside the truck were cataloged and analyzed to determine whether they indicated planning, ideological motivation, or coordination. The presence of weapons and suspicious materials expanded the scope of the investigation beyond vehicular assault. Digital data extraction followed. Investigators seized the suspect's phone, electronic devices, and vehicle data systems. Call logs, text messages, location history, internet searches, and app activity were reviewed. Vehicle GPS data and onboard computer records were examined to confirm the route traveled and driving behavior immediately before the attack. This data helped corroborate physical evidence collected at the scene. Surveillance footage played a critical role. Cameras from businesses, traffic intersections, hotels, and private residences across multiple blocks were collected and synchronized. Analysts traced the truck's movements before it entered Bourbon Street, identifying points where barriers were bypassed. Footage also captured crowd density, police positioning, and response times. This visual record allowed investigators to confirm the attack timeline with precision. Witness interviews were conducted systematically. Survivors, bystanders, first responders, and nearby business employees provided statements. Investigators cross-referenced accounts to identify consistencies and discrepancies. Particular attention was paid to witnesses who observed the truck's approach, speed, and maneuvering. These interviews reinforced a conclusion that the vehicle's movement was deliberate and sustained. Using all available data, authorities confirmed a minute-by-minute timeline of events. From the suspect arrival in the area to the final confrontation with police, investigators established a clear sequence that ruled out confusion, impairment, or accidental loss of control. A central focus of the investigation was determining intent. Evidence consistently pointed away from accident and toward deliberate action. The route taken avoided open streets and targeted densely populated pedestrian zones. The sustained acceleration and lack of evasive braking further supported intentional conduct. Indicators of premeditation emerged through digital records and physical evidence. Investigators identified planning behaviors, including prior reconnaissance of the area and preparation of materials found near the scene. The timing of the attack, coinciding with peak crowd density, was also noted as a critical factor. Symbolism and messaging were examined closely. Materials recovered suggested ideological motivation rather than personal grievance. Authorities analyzed whether the location, timing, or method aligned with known extremist tactics. Vehicle ramming attacks have been documented globally as a low-cost, high-impact strategy associated with extremist propaganda. Investigators searched for statements left behind, including written messages, digital drafts, or recorded content. Any language indicating ideological alignment or intent was evaluated by counterterrorism specialists. While certain indicators were confirmed, officials limited public disclosure to avoid compromising intelligence methods or ongoing assessments. Connections to extremist ideology were identified during the review of online activity. Analysts examined social media interactions, forums, and content consumption patterns. This review focused on whether the suspect acted independently or was influenced by external narratives or groups. No evidence of direct coordination with an organized network was publicly confirmed. Authorities assessed whether the suspect acted alone. While no accomplices were charged, investigators examined communication logs and financial records for signs of assistance or encouragement. The absence of co-conspirators did not eliminate concerns about ideological inspiration or indirect influence. Several questions about planning remain unresolved. Investigators did not disclose the full extent of pre-attack surveillance or whether any intelligence indicators existed prior to the event. Officials confirmed certain findings while withholding others, citing national security and investigative integrity. The attack prompted immediate scrutiny of security measures on Bourbon Street. Investigators identified failures in barricade systems designed to prevent vehicle access to pedestrian areas. Temporary barriers were either insufficient, improperly positioned, or bypassed entirely. Staffing levels at night became a focal point. Authorities reviewed officer deployment, shift coverage, and patrol patterns. While law enforcement was present, questions arose regarding whether personnel were adequately positioned to prevent vehicle intrusion during peak crowd hours. Bourbon Street's known vulnerabilities were not new. The area has long been recognized as a high-risk zone due to its layout, vehicle access points, and dense foot traffic. Prior assessments had identified the need for reinforced, permanent barriers capable of stopping large vehicles. Investigators reviewed previous warnings and comparable incidents in other cities. Vehicle ramming attacks at public gatherings had led to updated federal recommendations, raising questions about whether those guidelines were fully implemented. A key issue was whether the specific route used by the suspect should have been secured. Investigators analyzed maps, access points, and decision-making protocols that night. Responsibility was examined across city departments, law enforcement agencies, and federal oversight bodies. Internal reviews were launched to assess failures and recommend changes. These reviews examined planning documents, communication logs, and real-time decision-making. Findings were expected to influence future event security nationwide. As the investigation unfolded, Nikyra Cheyenne Dedeaux's family received confirmation of her death through official channels. Public statements released by the family focused on identifying her and clarifying misinformation circulating online. Nikyra was described as a recent high school graduate with plans to pursue a nursing career. Her educational goals and upcoming enrollment were confirmed by family members and school records. These details established her life trajectory prior to the attack. In the immediate aftermath, the family coordinated with authorities for identification and release procedures. Funeral and memorial arrangements followed, attended by relatives, friends, and community members. The family publicly requested transparency and accountability. They sought clear answers regarding how the attack occurred and whether it could have been prevented. Calls for improved public event security became a central theme of their statements. Their advocacy aligned with broader demands for reform, focusing on infrastructure, planning, and oversight. While no criminal trial followed due to the suspect's death, the family emphasized the importance of institutional accountability. In the hours following the attack on Bourbon Street, New Orleans shifted rapidly from celebration to crisis management. Law enforcement secured the affected area, while city officials coordinated emergency response efforts. Streets surrounding the incident were closed, public transportation routes were rerouted, and a heavy police presence remained in place for days. Residents and business owners in the French Quarter reported disruptions that extended well beyond the immediate crime scene, reflecting the scale of the event and the need for extended investigation. Public reaction in New Orleans unfolded in phases. Initial responses focused on safety concerns and logistical disruptions. As details emerged, attention turned to accountability, particularly regarding how a vehicle was able to access the pedestrian-heavy area during one of the city's most crowded nights of the year. Questions surfaced during city council meetings and public forums, with residents seeking clarity on security measures, barricade placement, and law enforcement staffing levels. Vigils and memorials were organized at multiple locations across the city, including informal gatherings near Bourbon Street, and structured memorial services coordinated by community leaders. These events served as public acknowledgments of the lives lost and were attended by residents, visitors, and officials. Temporary memorials, including candles, photographs, and written messages, remained in place for several weeks, becoming focal points for ongoing media coverage. National media coverage intensified as federal authorities classified the incident as a deliberate attack. Major news outlets provided continuous updates, shifting focus from the immediate event to broader implications involving public safety, domestic extremism, and large crowd security. Victim profiles, including that of Nikyra Cheyenne Dedeaux, were featured prominently, drawing attention to the personal consequences of the attack beyond the statistics. Political statements followed quickly at the local, state, and federal levels. City officials emphasized cooperation with federal investigators, while state leaders addressed public concerns regarding preparedness for large-scale events. At the federal level, statements centered on counterterrorism, domestic security, and the need for improved protective measures in public spaces. While these statements varied in tone and scope, they consistently acknowledged gaps exposed by the attack. In the weeks that followed, cities across the country reviewed their own public event security plans. Large metropolitan areas announced temporary increases in police presence for upcoming events, while smaller cities evaluated whether existing measures were sufficient. The attack prompted renewed concern about vehicle ramming threats, particularly in entertainment districts with open pedestrian access. Fear and uncertainty were not limited to New Orleans. Officials in other cities acknowledged similar vulnerabilities and the challenge of balancing accessibility with security. As the investigation progressed, attention turned toward legal accountability and policy reform. Civil lawsuits were filed or considered by victims' families against multiple entities, including municipal agencies and private contractors responsible for event security infrastructure. These legal actions focus on alleged failures in crowd control, inadequate barricades, and insufficient enforcement of restricted vehicle zones. While outcomes varied, the filing signaled a broader effort to seek answers through the legal system rather than criminal prosecution, given the suspect's death at the scene. Policy changes were proposed at both the city and state levels. In New Orleans, officials introduced revisions to event permitting requirements, mandating more comprehensive security plans for large gatherings. These proposals included stricter standards for physical barriers, expanded coordination between police and event organizers, and clearer lines of responsibility for enforcing restricted access zones. Permanent security installations became a central topic of discussion. Unlike temporary barricades, which can be moved or bypassed, permanent bollards and reinforced barriers were identified as more effective deterrents against vehicle-based attacks. Several high-traffic areas in New Orleans were assessed for long-term modifications, with plans developed to install fixed protective infrastructure in locations deemed high risk. Budget reallocations followed these proposals. Funding was redirected toward public safety initiatives, including infrastructure upgrades, surveillance technology, and additional training for law enforcement officers. These reallocations required adjustments to other municipal programs, sparking debate over priorities and long-term sustainability. At the state level, grants were considered to assist smaller municipalities in implementing similar protective measures. Long-term law enforcement strategies also evolved in response to the attack. Police departments emphasized intelligence-led policing, increased use of threat assessments, and enhanced coordination with federal agencies. Training programs were updated to include rapid response to vehicle-based threats and mass casualty scenarios. These strategies aim to improve prevention and response capabilities rather than relying solely on reactive measures. Federal recommendations for crowd protection were issued to guide cities nationwide. These recommendations outlined best practices for securing pedestrian zones, managing vehicle access, and conducting risk assessments for large events. While advisory in nature, they influenced policy decisions at multiple levels of government and became reference points for future planning. Despite extensive investigation and policy review, significant questions remain unresolved. One of the most persistent is whether the attack could have been prevented. Analysts continue to examine whether existing security measures were sufficient and whether alternative configurations could have stopped the vehicle before it reached the crowd. Questions also remain about warning signs. Investigators reviewed the suspect's background, online activity, and behavior leading up to the attack, but it is unclear whether any indicators rose to the level that would have triggered intervention. This uncertainty highlights broader challenges in identifying threats before they materialize. Intelligence sharing is another area of scrutiny. Determining whether information held by different agencies could have been combined or acted upon earlier remains a complex issue. While no definitive failures have been publicly confirmed, the lack of transparency around intelligence processes leaves room for speculation. Security failures continue to be debated. The effectiveness of barricades, staffing decisions, and enforcement protocols are still under review. Whether these factors directly contributed to the number of casualties is difficult to quantify, but they remain central to discussions about accountability. Some information related to the case remains sealed or undisclosed. This includes certain investigative details, security assessments, and internal reviews. The absence of full disclosure has fueled ongoing questions from the public and from victims' families seeking comprehensive explanations. Nikyra Cheyenne Dedeaux's life became part of a larger tragedy through circumstances beyond her control. Her death is recorded not only as an individual loss, but as one of multiple outcomes resulting from a single act that exposed systemic vulnerabilities in public safety. The lasting impact on her family extends beyond the immediate aftermath, encompassing legal proceedings, public attention, and long-term consequences that continue after the headlines fade. Their experience reflects the broader reality faced by families affected by mass casualty events. This case reshaped discussions about public safety by forcing officials and communities to confront the limits of existing security models. It contributed to policy changes, infrastructure upgrades, and renewed focus on prevention strategies. Nikyra's story matters beyond the headlines because it illustrates how policy decisions, security planning, and individual actions intersect with real lives. In a case with no trial, justice is defined not by verdict but by accountability, transparency, and the measures taken to prevent similar events in the future. If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. And if you want to hear more true crime stories that uncover the mysteries behind these tragic events, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest stories, updates, and discussions. Thank you for joining us on this journey to seek justice and explore the truth. Together, we can make a difference. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.